All right. Now let's move on. Let's talk about what happens when you start messing with the free market. All right. Obama's overtime rules. This happened in June of this year, I believe. In June of this year, the Obama administration announced new Labor Department rules significantly expanding the number of workers who are eligible for overtime pay. You see, right prior to this, if you were a salaried worker, but you made $23,000 a year or less, you were eligible for overtime pay. But if you made more than $23,000 a year and you were on salary, you didn't get overtime. They changed that to $47,000 a year and pumped on a whole bunch of new regulation in order to ensure that everybody followed the new rules. Now, workers earning above the amount of $47,000 are exempt from having to be paid overtime. Now, initially, even if this was done with the best of intentions, now I don't believe it was. I don't think that government acts in your best interest. I think that they act in their own best interest. This is a way for them to control the market. What they essentially said was you can put a guy on salary if you want to, but if he works more than 40 hours a week and you're paying him less than $50,000 a year, you've got to go the extra step of paying him overtime. This, of course, prevents greedy companies from putting people on salary and then forcing them to work 60 or 70 hours a week against their will, because naturally people would just lay down and take that. But I want to read to you what a listener wrote to me today. He said, Uh, so Obama's uh, oh so helpful new overtime rules for salaried workers ended up having an unforeseen effect. He said, my employer has always been extremely generous and would always pay salaried employees overtime or time and a half for hours worked over 40 hours a week, even though it wasn't the law. Because of their generous overtime policy, they never had to require salaried employees to do overtime because there were always volunteers when the workload got heavy. During the busy season, they would even pay double time for any hours over 40 hours a week. So you got an employer who's doing it right. He's taking care of his employees. And in fact, that is the vast majority of employers in this country. You want to know why? Because labor is a scarce resource. And if you have any kind of skilled labor, you don't want to lose them. You tend to treat your people right. Unless you are completely useless, employers do not like to retrain people. They don't like watching good employees leave. They like to fire bad employees, but they don't want to see the good ones walk away. And so here you have a company that's doing right by its employees in order to entice people to stay. Not only that, but because of the way they had set it up, because, hey, lots of people like to make extra money. I remember when I worked for the sheriff's department, I never celebrated Christmas or Thanksgiving on the day because that was always double time and a half. There was too much money to give up. I tried to work a 12-hour shift that day if I could. And there are plenty of people out there who are like that. Like, yeah, I'll celebrate Christmas on the 26th if you're going to pay me double time. Yeah, that's easy. We just have our Christmas a day late. And so there were always people who would be willing to do that. He said, so clearly my employer wasn't the target business that Obama's new overtime rules was meant to manipulate. But of course, the government's meddling in the free market has had an undesired consequence. He says it turns out the new rules are so complex and burdensome that my employer has decided to just switch all salaried employees to hourly and avoid the headache. This means less shift flexibility and less predictable paychecks for the workers. It also increased the amount of work HR has to do in order to track all the employee hours more strictly and increase the cost to my employer by adding more employees to the timekeeping system that we use. He says, funny how messing with the free market ends up hurting businesses that were already treating their employees fairly. And what I would submit to you guys is that regulation virtually always hurts the very people that it was intended to help. This is a prime example of it. This company, the workers at this company are now worse off than they were before the rules were enacted, rules that were supposed to protect people just like them. Now, the progressives will tell you, well, they're the exception and there's always exceptions to the rule. And I would submit to you, no, they are the rule. The exception are the people that you're trying to help with your regulation. And let's be clear, guys. before the regulation, somebody who was working for an employer, say in this same industry that Austin works in, this is Austin who's a listener to the show, someone who's working in the same industry that Austin works in, but working for a different company that doesn't treat its people right, if they worked hard and they were good at what they did, they had the option to go to Austin's company. Maybe they could get Austin's company to hire them. Now they don't have that option. Now they're just as screwed as everybody else. Now they're just as susceptible to variable paychecks and forced overtime and all of the other things that Austin's company was able to avoid because they treated their people right. This is it's sad. It's unnecessary, and I have a feeling that unless we start educating people on some basic principles of economics, we're going to get more and more of this. And unfortunately, the public school system has all but eliminated economics as a study.